Gith Sarai. Different planes. I think we're gonna have to do 3 episodes on this one, James. James? Hey, buddy. It's Gith time. Super excited. James? Where is he? Hello?
I am here to discuss monsters. Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Emme.
And welcome back to the Bestiary, no longer quarantine edition. This is our first episode being recorded in person in over a year. And not only are we happy about that, but we also get to talk about what today, Emme?
It's the Gith! They're so cool.
They're pretty cool.
They're really cool, you guys.
And there's a lot to talk about.
There's a lot to do. Real fast, before we go in there, we're going to talk about a little bit more down below, but we are throwing a little bit of a content warning on this one. The Gith are inherently unpleasant people. Well, inherently is the wrong word. They're not that way by nature, but their history is unpleasant.
The culture that has developed is not one that is good.
No. And the things that have happened to them, also not particularly nice. So we're going to throw some content warnings in here about slavery, about war. If these are things that you would rather avoid, this may be a place to kind of check out a little bit, or at the very least proceed with caution. These are things that can be manipulated, that if you want to have some Gith in your campaign, but also don't necessarily want to go into that trauma, there are ways to do that. But we are going to talk a little bit more in detail about the history within the Forgotten Realms and what's in the book, for better or for worse. And we just want you all to be safe and healthy.
Here. So, where to begin?
Oh, at the beginning, which is at an unknowable place in time. Yes. So the Gith were originally the warrior slave caste of the Illithid. Now, the Illithid really liked to just conquer stuff because, I don't know, they're weird alien creatures with tentacles for faces, and so they held on to the material plane at some point.
And we're not just talking about there being an Illithid empire that maybe spans like a world or a place or time. This was a multiple planet spanning, almost intergalactic empire.
Yes.
The scale of what was formed and what they controlled is almost unfathomable. It was interdimensional in nature. And so the warrior slaves of the Gith were also spread throughout space and time.
And in many ways, still are. So the Illithid are from the Far Realm. They're really hard and unknowable, and of course we will talk a little bit more about them when we get to I. But what did happen at some point, many thousands of years ago, was there was an uprising. There was a warrior amongst these people who at that time had no name. Their culture or who they were before the Illithid had them is gone. They don't even know realistically how much of what they are today is based on what they were before. It's largely believed that they were something else. In fact, some people even theorize that they were humans at some point in their history. But there was a warrior named Gith, from which the people take their name, and she had a big ol' uprising, and behind her they managed to destroy or dismantle most of the Illithid Empire. It no longer has anywhere near the staying power that it did before.
And truly, like, this is an epic event in the truest sense of the word. You know, we've talked about how this Illithid Empire spanned multiple worlds, and just the scale and length and ferocity of this conflict is probably beyond reckoning. Just the destruction that would have had to occur in order for this empire to be overthrown by a slave class is incredible, and actually presents a lot of very interesting questions in and of itself, which we might get to in a minute.
Oh yes, absolutely. Because, and the thing about this is that there are a lot of holes left in these books. There are things people know they're not talking about, and I'm not sure if they want you to necessarily fill these in yourself, or if they're planning on doing a campaign. I do know that the Gith are a very important part of Baldur's Gate 3, which I have not played. So I do not know exactly what the plan is for these plots, but there are a lot of heckin' holes. A lot of people. There's some suggestions in the books. I believe it's in Mordenkainen's, where they talk about how the realistic nature of it is that Illithid themselves are ridiculously powerful creatures on their own. And even though there were many thousands and hundreds of thousands of Gith, the logistics of that is kind of nightmarish. So either they had something that they're not necessarily disclosing, or the Illithids kind of let them win a little bit. And either way, that's a really terrifying
Raises even more
idea.
Questions.
Yeah, why? How?
Because, like, so it's a rite of passage for the Gith to slay an Illithid.
The
correct?
Githyanki, most
The Githyanki in
specifically.
particular.
Which we should also take a quick second to talk about. There are now two kinds of Gith.
Factions.
Two factions, as it were. They are evolutionarily identical. They are the same people, but they do not get along. They are not friends. There are the Githyanki and the Githzerai.
One of my favorite words that has come up a surprising amount of times in talking about things on Bestiary: schism.
Schism. There was a very, very deep schism. A deeply deep schism. But yes, we're talking about the Githyanki rite of passage, where you have to kill an Illithid.
Right.
Yeah.
But it takes like 10 Githyanki to take down one Illithid.
Yeah. If once
so, like, what's up with that?
What's up with that? It's yeah. And I mean, to be fair, these are younglings, but still, and they usually find one on its own. That's the thing about it. They usually go and find one on its own, and it still takes an impressive amount of people to take one down. They are immensely hard, and when there's a lot of them, like a whole civilization of them, it's really difficult. And to go a little bit further into said schism, at one point during said war, there was a Gith named Zerthamon, and he pointed out that the way Gith was having her soldiers act and behave, and the rules and culture that she was laying down upon them, and the things she wanted them to do, were pretty much how they were being treated by the Illithid and what the Illithid wanted them to do. And he was like, yeah, why did we overthrow this whole empire if you're just going to treat us pretty much exactly the same as we were before? And there was a big old war, which is still happening right now. Still happening as of this exact moment in time in the material plane, at least as far as D&D is concerned.
Yeah. In subsequent episodes, we're going to specialize in the Githyanki and the Githzerai, respectively. But to kind of give a general description, yeah, after this big break in Gith society because of the criticisms in the way that the war was being prosecuted, the two factions went in their own separate directions. And I think it's fair to say that the Githyanki now kind of embody chaos, and the Githzerai embody order.
In many ways. The Githyanki, I mean, they're not all that dissimilar to what they were underneath the Illithid, except for that they're in charge now.
Now they're just doing it because they want to.
Exactly. So what they do primarily is they are raiders. They live, and that's the other thing, none of these people actually have their base on the material plane. They are both extraplanar beings. So
interdimensional badasses.
Yeah. And so the Githyanki live on the astral plane, and they realistically come to the material plane primarily to take stuff. They're big fans of taking stuff. Mm-hmm. They really like stuff. And then
Pirates, raiders. They also only age on the material plane.
very important, actually. So they come to the material plane to have children and raise children, but they don't enjoy staying there because they will age. And the Gith lifespan is only about that of a human naturally. So 80 to 100 years, gives these or takes these a little bit. So they don't typically like to come there unless they're taking something or they're raising a kid, which we'll get more into in the Githyanki episode, but is deeply, deeply complicated and a whole thing in and of itself. And then the Githzerai build monasteries of order upon the plane of chaos.
Brilliant contradiction.
What? That's well, again, because it's difficult. That's the thing, is that they are aesthetics and philosophers, and their whole idea is that they've been granted these powers, and so they'll start to carve stuff out because it's hard, which is also a point we should start talking about. That's a huge thing about them. They are psionic. Yeah. Which is a fun, very different thing in this particular realm than magic. Psionics and magic are deeply different, especially as far as the Illithid are concerned, which we'll talk more about again when we get to I. But they are different. It's more telekinesis, telepathy.
Yeah, it's psychic powers.
Psychic powers. And so it's deeply, deeply different, and it's entrenched in them. It's a part of their brains. Yeah. All Gith are psionic.
It's not something you learn, it's just a thing you can do. And they're not the only race or species to have this effect, but it's actually kind of a hereditary impact from having been enslaved by the Illithids. Yeah. They were kind of, because as we've already mentioned, the Gith are a modified version of something that was before them, but nobody really knows what that was. And part of that process is kind of implanting the natural ability to use telekinetic and psychic powers.
Because that's how you interact with Illithid technology, which
both... Because they can't talk.
Nope, they can't talk. They exist and manipulate all of their technology psionically, and both sides still operate a certain degree of Illithid technology and old Illithid stuff. So you will see a decent amount of Illithid influence still to this day in the way that they operate through the planes, which is unique and interesting. I know especially the Githyanki have airships.
Which have kind of been reverse engineered from Illithid nautiloids.
Exactly. And so in order to interact with this stuff, they had to be psionic, so they all are now, which is a lot.
Yeah. Good way to put it, just it's a lot.
It's a lot. That's the whole Gith thing. And they're both led by weird things that are almost dead.
Oh yeah, you think this is weird already?
It just keeps getting weirder.
It gets weirder.
Oh, they just keep getting weirder, because both of them have leaders who are no longer there. Gith, at least present at this moment, it's real weird. Gith did the whole dragon thing.
So the war wasn't going super well with the Illithids, and a lot of death was happening, and Gith was kind of like, how do we make this better? And might have quite literally made a deal with Tiamat.
Yeah, she sure did. Which is why you will still to this day see Githyanki riding red dragons.
Githyanki have red dragons as servants.
Yep.
As part of a deal.
It's a deal. That's the deal. And so they have red dragons that they can just ride. They have a pact of non-aggression essentially through Tiamat, which says that, and I mean, you won't see usually like ancient red dragons because they can't age on the astral plane either, which is not superbly ideal for a dragon. You usually see young ones, but they will work together for a certain period of time in exchange for loot, because the Githyanki have lots and lots and lots and lots of loot.
And dragons like loot.
And dragons like loot, so they will get a heckin' good thing out of the deal. But in exchange, when Gith went to go meet with Tiamat, she never came back.
Yeah, which raises a lot of other questions. And so kind of the de facto leader of the Githyanki faction became Vlaakith.
Yes, the Lich Queen Vlaakith. She's a lich.
But they don't know that.
Well, they kind of do.
They kind of do.
It's complicated. It's a cult. which again,
It's a cult.
we'll get more into it later, but there is the cult of Gith these days is run by Vlokith, and they know that she's lich, but they don't really know what that means in that way. It's deeply complicated. So we'll pop into that on that episode, but it's real scary and real weird. And then the Githzerai, Zerthamon died in the war, the first volleys of the war.
The big war.
The big war. The big part of the first war that's still happening. And they are to this day, and I keep forgetting his name, it is, I have it right here, Menyar Ag. And Menyar Ag is about as old, both of them are both very old, because they are both still alive. Menyar Ag was Zerthamon's lieutenant. It's so complicated, you guys. Menyar Ag was Zerthamon's lieutenant, and he now leads the Githzerai, but he's so old that he can no longer move and is kept alive by sheer force of will.
He's so old.
He's so old. Yeah, he just has people bring stuff to him, and that's about it. Like, he thinks and he's awake, but he can't.
He's just concentrating super hard on staying alive.
Not death, that's about it. And so they both have these really weird rulers that they just follow around who are pretty much dead. It's a lot, you guys.
But yeah, the Gith are awesome and really weird and super metal and kind of confusing. And they're like Emmy's favorite thing.
I love them so much.
And I can absolutely see why.
They're very dark, and I can see where for some campaigns and for some folks this might be a little bit too dark.
It's a bit heavy.
It's a bit heavy, and there are ways that you could do it again without getting into some of the super, super dark stuff. There's really a gradient of how dark you could want to get with these guys, and that's completely fair. But just their history is so long and confusing, and their relationship with other peoples on the material plane is so deeply interesting. It's a very old property. It's very old as far as D&D is concerned. These guys are some of the original. So there's just a lot of history there, and I don't know, I just love them. They're so weird. They're so weird, you guys. Thank you so much for joining us this week on The Bestiary, Monster Manual A through Z, together again once at last. Have you ever met a Githyanki or a Githzera, and did you ask them details about where they were from? Please tell us the story in the comments down below. And while you're there, you can check out all the links to all of our social media. You can like this video. You can subscribe. You can watch some more of our videos here, and join us next week when we'll be talking even more about the Githyanki.